Well, hello. Today's movie is the classic Stanley Kubrick film, 2001, A Space Odyssey. In prehistoric times, a tribe of apes was visited by an alien monolith that affects their development. Forward to 2001, and humans now have space stations and colonies on the moon. A scientist travels to the American base to investigate the discovery of an alien artifact. This monolith then sends out a signal to Jupiter. "18 months later, an exhibition on Discovery 1 heads to Jupiter to investigate the source. The HAL 9000 computer starts to act erratic. The two astronauts discuss the possibility of having to deactivate HAL. HAL acts and severs the airline of one of the astronauts. The other goes out to rescue him and finds that HAL won't let him then back into the ship. HAL also shuts off the life support of those in suspended animation, killing them. The surviving astronaut must manually open the hatch and attempt a risky maneuver to enter. Once in, though, he then proceeds to take out HAL's memory circuits. He continues on to Jupiter and finds an alien monolith. Through a weird transportation, he finds himself in some kind of neoclassical room. And from there, it gets pretty weird. So this was a movie that Stanley Kubrick decided he wanted to do a science fiction one. And he wanted to make it very realistic. So he got together with Arthur C. Clarke, who was a science fiction writer. And, based on some of his short stories, they wrote a screenplay together. And this is the movie that it was a result of it. And it's also kind of a first movie done to actually try and portray space travel in a realistic way with weightlessness and stuff. And, it was a big success, money-wise. Like just a $10 million budget, they made $146 million, so it was a big money winner. There's a lot of critics who didn't like it at the time. But, like many of his films, they do start to gain appreciation over time, and it's looked on as a real classic. It did get 4 Oscar nominations at the time, and it actually won one for Best Special Effects, which that's not surprising because the effects hold up really well even 50 years later. They're very good, and it is a long movie. It lasted 139 minutes, and I guess when they first screened it, like for the critics or something, like supposedly there was a 161-minute version, which also probably kind of helped with the negative reviews. I know here Stanley Kubrick apparently decided before he died he had most of the excess stuff burned so it couldn't be used, and maybe that's a smart idea. And so this is a interesting movie. I remember, like, way back, when it was on HBO and I was like 9 or something, I tried to watch it. And, after about 10 minutes or something, I just went to bed because it bored the hell out of me. So, it's definitely not a movie for young kids. In a lot of ways, probably even adults will find it very slow. It wasn't until I was an adult where I started to appreciate this movie. It's it's very beautiful. It's very well shot. I mean, there's a lot of long scenes. Like I said, there are a lot of long scenes, set to like classical music, like the Blue Danube and that. and it's you know, it's kind of a slow moving movie. I have to acknowledge that. So it's probably not a lot of people's favorites, but I found it quite interesting. Just looking at the future, what was envisioned, because this was 1968. The space race was in full force, and we were going to land on the moon a year later. And there's a lot of optimism about our future in space. So like in 2001, we already had commercial flights to space stations. There was a base on the moon. We were sending out expeditions to Jupiter. Actually, and I liked how they portrayed it. The space station in that, it had stuff like a Howard Johnson's and a Sheridan and stuff, and the commercial space shuttle was Pan Am. Interesting enough, Pan Am did not last to see the year 2001. So now we're 25 years or so in the future, and we're nowhere near the future that this was envisioned. There's no colonies on the moon. There is the International Space Station, but it's definitely a very primitive thing. And it's sad kind of that we didn't live up to the future that they envisioned. But that's how the world goes. And like I say, it's just a beautiful movie. There's just a lot of beautiful imagery of it. I enjoy that, and the Hal. Interesting bit of trivia is Hal came about by taking the first letters before IBM. So that's how Hal got his name. And Arthur C. Clarke did eventually do a novelization of this, and he also wrote 3 sequels to it, and one of them actually got made into a movie, which someday I'll do. And I think I'd like to read those books someday too, because they might be interesting. I think answer a lot of questions that wasn't answered in this. Now, also at the end, it gets very weird. I mean, just really, really surreal and weird. And there's a lot of trippy images, and then his time in the kind of neoclassical room where he just grows old and turns into a star baby. And yeah, there's a lot of and you can spend hours on it probably trying to analyze what this movie's about, and don't have the time for that, and that's not really my interest either. It's just kind of it's a well done movie. I've really started to enjoy Stanley Kubrick's work, and I've been watching a lot of his films lately. So it's it's a good solid movie, but it might not be for everybody. So. And if you stuck with me this long, I thank you. You're a unique individual.